Hello and welcome to Read with Aristide. Welcome to WatchMojo.com. So, y'all didn't see my toes. Y'all didn't see the doggies there. So, um, anyway, I did a lot of talking, cause I don't know. I was gonna make a final chat with Matt, updating on my life, but I kept accidentally talking about personal things, and I'm like, man, I don't need to upload this. But the TLDR of those videos was just essentially I was really going through it when I was 17, 18 when I started the channel, and I said a lot. I didn't say anything too compromising, but it's just something that doesn't need to be out there. I definitely use this channel as a safe space to talk about personal things in my life that were bothering me. But right now I have a boyfriend of 2 years that I love and trust, that I can talk to about those things, right? And I don't have to talk to this channel about them. So yeah, we will be reading chapter 2 of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Fyodor Dostoevsky. This is a good book. Like I said in the introduction on the first video, probably one of my favorites. Anyway, I'm sitting far away from the camera compared to last episode. So yeah, I'm hoping you can hear me, but if not, man, just turn it up, put your headphones in. There's no headphone warnings. There's literally no possible way that I could jump scare you with a freaking Sorry for the jump scare. Okay. I got you there. Alright, chapter 2. Raskolnikov was not used to crowds and had been avoiding company, especially recently. Yet something now suddenly began to draw him to people. Something new was taking place within him, and with this went a kind of craving for people. After a whole month of concentrated melancholy and gloomy excitement, he was so weary he wanted to take breath in some other world, no matter what kind, and even if only for a moment. In spite of all the dirt around him, it was actually with pleasure he lingered in the saloon. The owner was in another room, but every now and then he descended by some steps into the main room. First, a pair of quite fancy boots with large red overflaps would appear, then a long vest, no tie, and a very dirty black satin jacket. In the face, which seemed smeared in grease, as though it were an iron padlock. Behind the counter stood a boy of about 14. A younger boy waited on customers. Here and there were sliced pickles, black crusts, and fish cut up in chunks. It all had a bad smell, unbearably stale. The atmosphere was so thoroughly stoked with alcohol, it seemed you could get drunk in 5 minutes here, from the air alone. There are some people who interest us immediately, at first glance, before a word is exchanged. The customer sitting by himself, who looked like a retired government clerk, had this effect on Raskolnikov. Later, Raskolnikov would recall that first impression and think of it as an omen. He kept staring at the clerk just because the latter also was gazing uninterruptedly at him. The clerk apparently very much wanted to strike up a conversation. He looked at everyone else in the saloon, including the owner, with a bored stare that assumed the familiarity of it all met, not without a trace of arrogance, as though he was looking at people socially and intellectually beneath him, with whom he could find little to talk about. He was a man in his early 50s, of average height and solid build. He had a graying fringe of hair and a large bald spot. His face, puffed out from steady drinking, had taken on a yellow, even greenish tinge, and he had swollen eyelids from under which he flashed slits of tiny but animated reddish eyes. Yet there was something very strange about him. When he looked at you, there was the flash of a kind of exaltation, and perhaps even intelligence, too, and sense, but also the glitter of a kind of madness. He was dressed in an old black, quite ragged frock coat, and its buttons were missing. He sat with one button that still hung by a thread buttoned up, as though he was clinging to its last shred of respectability. A shirt tail stuck out from under his nankeen jacket, and it was crumpled, soaked, and soiled. Excuse me. As a government clerk, once upon a time, he had kept clean-shaven, but now his face displayed a thick bluish-gray bristle. There was really something solidly official about his manner, yet he was in distress. He kept running a hand through his hair, or sometimes he propped exposed elbows on the wet, sticky table, gloomily supporting his head with both hands. Finally, he looked straight at Raskolnikov and said loudly and firmly, May I be so bold, my dear sir, as to engage you in polite conversation? Although you are not well dressed, my experience discerns you an educated man, and one unaccustomed to strong drink. That's not how he was sounding. I'm gonna give him a southern accent. I don't know why. They're all Russian. Or German. Although you're not well dressed, my experience discerns you an educated man and one unaccustomed to strong drink. I myself have always respected learning when it is combined with sincere feelings. Moreover, I'm a titular counselor. Marmeladov is my name, titular counselor Marmeladov. May I be so bold as to inquire, are you in government service? No, I'm studying, the young man answered. Marmeladov's peculiarly florid turn of speech surprised him. Raskolnikov did not like the way the conversation immediately focused upon himself. Although he had been longing but for a moment ago for almost any kind of human community, the first word actually addressed to him induced a feeling of disgust. Such talk from a stranger, or even a mere allusion to himself as a subject, always made him feel that way. A student or former student, the government clerk shouted. I thought so. Experience tells, my dear sir. Long experience. He tapped his finger to his forehead in a sign of self-esteem. I knew immediately that you were from somewhere in the world of learning, but permit. He rose, staggered, seized his glass and pitcher, and sat down close to the young man, almost diagonally across from him. Though drunk, he spoke sonorously and fluently, only occasionally stumbling here and there, dragging out his speech. Don't roast me on my lack of vocabulary. No one says sonorously. No one says sonorously in their day-to-day language, so don't roast me. I don't need, bro. As though he had too spoken to no one for a whole month, he fastened on Raskolnikov with a certain desperation. My dear sir, he began almost solemnly, poverty's no vice, and that's the truth. Drunkenness, however, is no virtue, and that's the truth too, only more so. But destitution, my dear sir, destitution is most certainly a vice. You may be poor, yet still retain a certain inborn nobility of feeling. When you are destitute, there's nothing, there's nobody. When you are destitute, they don't stick to chase you away. When you are destitute, they sweep you clear of human companionship, and just make it more insulting, they use a broom, and rightly so. When I am destitute, no one is quicker to humiliate me than I myself. And the next step is the bottle. It was a month ago, my dear sir, that Mr. Lesbanikov beat my wife. Do you know what that means? Mind you, my wife is not what I am. Allow me to ask you another question, just out of curiosity. Have you ever spent a night on the Neva, on the hay barges? No, said Raskolnikov. What are you driving at? Well, now I just came from here 5th night now. Filling his glass, he drank it down and paused reflectively. There were bits of hay clinging to his clothes and his hair. He had probably not undressed or washed for 5 days. His hands were especially dirty, greasy, red from exposure, fingernails black. His talk seemed to elicit general, if idle, interest. The boys behind the counter began to snicker. Even the host began to wander down from the room above on purpose to listen to the clown. Want to hear an intro, Marie? Yo, I am so excited for the Lady Gaga movie. Anyway, sorry. He sat down lazily at a distance and yawned pompously. Evidently, Marmeladov was well known here and had acquired that rhetorical flair of his in many such talks in many such saloons. There are heavy drinkers who become compulsive talkers, especially those who are henpecked at home, and they are always trying to persuade their drinking companions to show them some justice and maybe, even if possible, some respect. Clown, the host presidently proclaimed. Why aren't you working? If you're a civil servant, why don't you serve? The reason I do not serve, my dear sir, excuse me, I drink a glass of milk, sorry, rejoined Marmeladov, but addressing himself so exclusively to Raskolnikov, as if he had asked the question. Ah, yes, the reason I do not serve, rest assured, sir, that because I grovel in the dust as I do. My heart aches and I know it is to no avail. And when a month ago, Mr. Lesbanikov beat my wife with his own hands while I was lying there drunk, did I not suffer? Permit me, young man, has it ever happened to you, well, to ask for a loan without a chance? It has, but what do you mean without a chance? I mean without the ghost of a chance getting it. When you know beforehand that you won't get anywhere. When you know beforehand and you know it well that is such respectable, most worthy, and most supremely important, sir, will not even dream of giving you any money. And why should he? And why should he? I ask you. After all, he knows I won't give it back out of compassion. But Mr. Lesbenikov, sorry. But Mr. Lesbenikov, that follower of modern ideals, took pains to explain the other day that in our time, compassion is actually forbidden by us by science, and that where political economy is practiced, compassion is already abolished by law. Why, I asked, should he give? Well, so you know ahead of my time he won't give, but you go anyway, and why do you go? Raskolnikov joined in. Yet, if you do not go to him, you have nowhere else to go, and everyone needs somewhere, a place they can go. There comes a time, you see, inevitably, there comes a time you have a somewhere you can go. When my only daughter took to the streets for the first time, I had to go too, for my daughter lives by the yellow ticket, he added parenthetically, and he looked at the young man with a certain distress. It's nothing, my dear sir, nothing, he immediately hastened to declare, apparently calmly, when both boys behind the counter snorted and the host himself smiled. Nothing, sir. This shaking of heads does not disturb me in the least, for the cat is altogether out of the bag, and I regard this as not with scorn but with humility. So be it, so be it. Behold the man. Permit me, young man. Perhaps you might, no. Permit me to put in more bluntly and more vividly. Not, perhaps you might, oh no, but do you dare, you who gaze on me as I am now, do you dare state defiantly that I am not a peg? The young man said not a word in reply. The orator waited for the laughter in the room to subside and continued. Well then, he said solemnly with an access of dignity. Well then, so be it. I am a swine, but she is a lady. I am the shape of a beast, but Catherine Ivanovna, my wife, she's an educated person. She was born the daughter of a staff officer. So be it, so be it. I am a scoundrel while she is lofty and spirited, and her feelings have been ennobled by education. Still, if she only pitied me, my dear sir, everyone needs a small such somewhere where he knows he will be pitied. Catherine Ivanovna, she's magnanimous. Bro, y'all got me like the Golden Freddy. Y'all got me like, Sorry. But she's unjust, I know, of course. I know myself that when she pulls my hair out of pity. For I repeat without shame, young man, she does pull my hair. He confirmed this with a special dignity after hearing the snickering once again. But, oh God, if she would only once... I don't know. What am I talking about? It's happened more than once, what I wished for, and I was pitied after all, but that's why I am. I'm a beast by nature. You said it, the host remarked with a yawn. Oh, that's the way. Marmeladov pounded his fist on the table. That's the way I am. Do you know that I even drank up her stockings? Not her shoes, mind you, for that might still fall within the natural order of things. Not her shoes, my dear sir, but her stockings. I drank up her stockings. Her mohair shawl, yeah, I drank that up too. The one she used to own. It was a present, her own property, not mine at all. It's chilly where we live. This past winter she caught a cold and started to cough. Now she's coughing blood. We have 3 small children, and Catherine Ivanovna works at them morning to night. She combs and washes and scrubs those kids. You see, she used to being clean, used to it from childhood, but she has a weak chest and a tendency to consumption, and, I feel this. Oh, don't I feel it, though? And the more I drink, the more I feel it. That's why I drink, because when I drink, I look for compassion. I look for feeling. I drink because I want to suffer. And as if in desperation, he leaned his head upon the table. Young man, he raised his head again and continued, I read a certain sorrow on your face. As soon as you came in, I noticed it, and that is why I turned to you. The reason I tell you the story of my life is not because I desire to make a spectacle of myself before these idlers. They know it all anyway. I am looking for a sensitive and educated man. You should, I ship it. Um, you should know that my wife received her education in an exclusive gentry institute in the provinces. At commencement, she danced the shout dance in the presence of the governor and other dignitaries, and she won a gold medal and a citation for it. The medal, yes, it was sold some time ago. The citation lies in the bottom of her trunk to this day. She was showing it to our landlady not long ago. She fights with the landlady all the time, mind you. Still, she wanted to show off a bit and talk to somebody about happy days past. And I don't condemn it. I don't condemn it. This is all she could scrape from the last of her memories. Everything else has gone to dust. Yes, yes, a willful, proud, and passionate lady. Washes her own floors and eats black bread, but she'll allow no respect. She will not suffer Mr. Lesbian Nanakov's rudeness. And that's why, when Mr. Lesbian Nanakov beat her for it, she took to her bed. Not so much from the blows as from her feelings. When I married her, she was already a widow with 3 children, each one smaller than the next. Her first husband was an infantry officer, and she married him out of love. They eloped. She loved this first husband very much, but he took to the cars, wound up in court, and then he died. Towards the end, he used to beat her, and while she didn't just let him get away with it, I know this very well, my dear sir, there is documentary proof. Why are there parentheses? How are you going to say parentheses in a speech? Still, to this day, she remembers him with tears in her eyes, and she throws him up to me. And I'm glad she sees herself, even though it's in her fancy, as happy once upon a time. When he died, she was left with 3 small children in a remote and barbarous province, where I also happened to be at the time. She was left in such a hopeless destitution that though I've seen quite a bit of the world, could not even begin to describe it. Her relatives wouldn't have anything to do with her. She was proud, you see, thoroughly proud. And at that time, I was a widower too. My dear sir, at that time, I had a 14-year-old daughter to be my first wife. I offered my hand. I could not bear to look on such suffering. You may judge for yourself, sir, how hard up she was. She agreed to marry me, the well-bred, well-educated daughter of a distinguished family. But she did. Yes, weeping and wailing and wringing her hands, she did, because there was nowhere to go. Do you understand now, my dear sir, what it means having nowhere to go? No, you wouldn't understand that yet. For a whole year, I did my duty honorably and in good faith. I did not touch the stuff. He tapped his finger on the picture. For I want you to know that I'm a man of feeling. Even so, I had no power to please. And then I lost my job. It wasn't even my own fault at the time. The staff was being reorganized. Then I started hitting the bottle, really. A year and a half ago it was, we found ourselves at last, at many wanderings and numerous calamities in this metropolis so superbly ornamented by innumerable monuments. And I found a job here too. I found a job and I lost it again. See, this time it was my own fault. The way I really am, it finally caught up with me. Next thing you know, we were living in that corner we rent our landladies, Amalia Fidinorva Lipowesho. How we live, what we pair with, I cannot tell you. We are not the only ones who live here, needless to say. A most disorderly Sodom. Yes, my daughter, the daughter of my first marriage, grew up meanwhile. What she suffered in her growing up from her stepmother, about that I will not speak. Catherine Ivanova overflows magnanimity, mind you. But she is a lady of temperament. She has her nerve, and she will break out. Yes, well, no point in lingering on it. As for my poor Sonia's upbringing, as you may well imagine, she received none. 4 years ago, I tried to teach her a little geography with some world history thrown in. But I was not really strong on these subjects myself, and we had no appropriate text because whatever books we had, well, we did not have them anymore. Well, that put an end to her instruction. Excuse me. We stopped at Cyrus the Persian. Oh my God. Period, because I literally, one of my closest friends is named Cyrus and he's Persian. Later, when she was grown up, she read a few books of romantic nature, and not long ago, through Mr. Lesbeniakov, she read Lewis' Physiology. Do you by any chance know she read it with great interest and even read some passages aloud to us, and that's the whole of her education. Now, my dear sir, I would like to turn to you my own account with a personal question. Do you think a poor but honorable girl can earn as much as honest labor? If she is honorable and has no special talents, she will not, sir, earn 15 kopecks a day, and I mean working without a stop. Then there is State Councilor Ivan Klopstock. Do you know him? To this day, he was not paid for her for the half-dozen holland shirts she sewed. Not only that, he drove her off with an insult, stamped his feet, and shouted obscenities at her, claiming a collar was askew, not sewn according to specifications, and so the little ones go hungry. And so Catherine Ivanova paces the room, wringing her hands and red stains come out on her cheeks the way they do when you have a disease. Just look at you, you parasite sponging off us. You eat, you drink, you keep warm. What she's eating and drinking, God knows. Even the kids hadn't seen a crust of bread for 3 days. I was down on the floor then. Well, I won't deny it. I was down on the floor drunk, and I hear Sonia talking. She is meek. Her voice is so mild. Blonde little creature, face always kind of pale, skinny. She says, Catherine Ivanova, you don't really want me to do a thing like that, do you? There was a wicked woman named Daria Frantsnova, well known to the police, who had tried a couple of times to get in touch with her through the landlady. And why now? Answers Catherine Ivanova in mockery. What are you saving it for? Some treasure? But you mustn't blame her. You mustn't blame her, my dear sir. You mustn't blame her. She was not in her right mind. She was consumed by our wasting disease. Her feelings were all upset. She heard the weeping of her hungry children. What happened to my southern accent? Sorry. She heard the weeping of her hungry children, and it was said more to wound than in the precise sense, because that is Catherine Ivanova's nature. And if the children should burst out weeping, even though they do it because they are hungry right away as she starts to beat them, I think it was close to 6 o'clock. I look and see my Sonia get up. She pulls on her cape and kerchief, and she leaves the apartment. It was around 9 when she returned. She returned, walked straight up to Catherine Ivanova, and quietly put 30 rubles on the table in front of her. She did not utter a word. She did not even look. She took out a large green light wool shawl. We have a light wool shawl that we all use. And she hid her head and face in it and lay down in the bed with her face to the wall. Her body and shoulders kept trembling. And I lay there and I was... Then after that, young man, I saw Catherine Ivanova go to my Sonia's bed. She spent the whole evening on her knees at Sonia's feet, and she kissed her feet and did not want to rise. And they both fell asleep in one another's arm. Both, yes, sir. But I, sir, was lying there drunk. I don't know why I can't say his name. Marmeladov fell silent, as though his voice had dried up. Suddenly he poured himself a drink, hastily drank it down, and grunted. After a certain silence, he continued. From that time, sir, because of one unfortunate occurrence and because malicious people reported her, and it was Daria Frantsnova who urged all that along, it seemed she felt she had not been shown sufficient respect. From that time, my daughter, Sophia Simonovna, I'm sorry, y'all, had to register as a prostitute and carry the yellow ticket, and for that reason she could no longer live with us. Our landlady, Amalia Fedorovna, would not allow it. She was in league with Daria Frantsnova herself at first, mind you, and Mr. Lesbenikov. That incident between him and Catherine Ivanova was on Sonia's account. First he tried to get at Sonia himself, then suddenly he stood back on his dignity. How could a man as enlightened as myself live in the same rooms as a like of that? But Catherine Ivanova would not have it. She went up to him, and well, it happened. Now, it's mostly after dark my Sonia comes up to us. She helps Catherine Ivanova and provides what she can. She lives in an apartment at the Taylor Kabranov's place. She rents an apartment there. Kapernamov is lame, and he stutters, and everybody in his whole large family stutters. And his wife stutters, too. They live in one room, and Sonia has her own room with a partition. Yes. The poorest kind of people, and they all stutter, yes. And then, when I rose in the morning, I put on my rags and patches, I raised my hands to heaven, and I went to see His Excellency, Ivan Afanasyev. Do you know who happens to know His Excellency, Ivan Afanasyev? No? Well, it is a man of God that you do not know. This man is wax. Wax before the Lord's face, even as wax my lamp. Melteth. Why the heck did I say Melteth? Okay, wait. And when he heard my story, he wept. Well, my Meladov, he says, I've been disappointed in you once. I'll take you again, on my own responsibility. That is the way it was put. Remember, he said, and you may go now. I kissed the dust at his feet metaphorically, of course, for he would never actually have permitted it. He is a state dignitary and a man of modern education and statesmanlike ideas. I returned home, and when I declared I had a job again and received a salary, Laura went on. Marmeladov paused again, very much aroused. At that moment, a party came in from the street. They were all drunk. The sound of a hired bar organ came from the entrance, and the cracked childish voice of a 7-year-old singing "The Farm." It grew noisy. The host and staff occupied themselves with the newcomers, to whom Marmeladov, however, paid no attention. He resumed his story. Apparently, he had weakened considerably, yet the more drunk, the more fluent he became. Remembering his recent success in the service seemed to enliven him, and to imbue the face with a kind of radiance. Raskolnikov listened attentively. "All that happened 5 weeks ago, my dear sir. Yes. No sooner had they heard about it, Catherine Ivanovna and my Sonia, when, Lord, it became exactly though I had been transported into the kingdom of heaven, the way it used to be. I'd be lying there, and they treat me as though I were cattle, nothing but abuse. And now they're suddenly walking around on tiptoe, hushing the children. Semyon Zakharyak has been working hard. He needs rest. Shh. Before I went off to work, they made coffee for me and boiled cream for it. Real cream they started to feed me, remind you. And how to scrape up 11 rubles 50 kopecks so I could have a decent uniform, I do not understand. Boots, linen, chevrons, the best kind. In my everyday uniform, they scraped it all together in the most remarkable way, all for 11 and a half. My first day home from work for lunch, I took a look. There was soup and corned beef with horseradish, 2 whole courses Catherine Ivanovna had prepared. That would have been unheard of before. She has no clothes, mind you, really none at all. And here I see she's dressed up as though she was going to a party. She didn't have a thing, but somehow these women can make everything out of nothing. A little bit of fixing up of the hair, a neat clean little collar of some kind, some cuffs, and lo and behold, she looks like an altogether different kind of person, younger and prettier. My Sonia, my dove, help only with money. It's too early, she says. I can't come personally. If I come to see you too often, it's awkward, unless I come after dark when no one will see me. Do you hear that? Do you hear? After dinner, I lay down for a nap. And what do you think? Catherine Ivanovna could scarcely hold back any longer. Not more than a week ago, she and the landlady, Amalia Fedorovna, had blown up at each other. Now Catherine Ivanovna suddenly calls her in for a cup of coffee. They sat together for 2 hours and hashed it all over in whispers. You see, Semyon Zakharyak is back in the service now and receiving his salary. He appeared before His Excellency, and His Excellency came out in person. His Excellency ordered everybody else to wait, but Semyon Zakharyak, he led by hand past them all, right into his office. Do you hear that? Do you hear? Of course, I remember your past service, Semyon Zakharyak, he says, and I know you used to have this little weakness. But things have gone badly here without you, and since you promised, do you hear that? Do you hear? I'll depend on you, he says, and on your word of honor. Everything I'm telling you, all of it, she made up herself. But you mustn't think she was just foolishly bragging. Oh no, she believed every bit of it herself. She was comforting herself with her fantasies, and by God, I don't blame her, nor do I blame her for it. 6 days ago, I brought my first full pay, 23 rubles 40 kopecks, and she called me her little minnow. Little minnow, she says. You are my little minnow. We were alone. We were alone by ourselves, mind you. I'm no beauty, and what kind of husband am I, after all? And yet she pinched my cheek. You are my little minnow, she says. Marmeladov paused. He wanted to smile, but his chin suddenly began to quiver. Yet he restrained himself. The saloon, the man's dissipated appearance, his 5 nights at Freddy's, and with all his morbid love for wife and family, bewildered Raskolnikov, who was listening intently but with a morbid sensation. He regretted having come here. Marmeladov recovered himself. My dear sir, he exclaimed. Oh, my dear sir, perhaps it all seems a laughing matter to you as it does to others, and I merely annoy you with the stupid little miserable details of my domestic life. But to me it's not a laughing matter, for I can feel it all. All that heavenly day in my life, and that whole evening I allowed myself to be carried away by the fleeting dreams. I will fix everything, buy clothes for the little ones, comfort my wife, rescue my own daughter from dishonor, and bring her back into the bosom of the family, and so on and so on. It's understandable, sir. Well, then, my dear sir. Marmeladov suddenly winced, raised his head, and gazed steadily at his listener. Well, then, after all those dreams, on the very next day, 5 days ago exactly, as evening came on like a thief in the night, I used a sly trick. I pried loose the key to Catherine Ivanova's strong box, and I took out what was left of the pay I brought home. How much of it, I don't remember. And mind you, look at me. Look at me now, that was all. It is my 5th day away from home. They are looking for me there, and my job is done with, and my uniform lies in a saloon near the Egyptian bridge. I picked up this outfit instead, and everything is finished. Marmeladov pounded himself on the forehead with his fist, ground his teeth, and closed his eyes, and leaned his elbow heavily on the table. Yet after a moment his face changed suddenly. It was with a certain self-indulgent slyness and affected bravado that he threw Raskolnikov a quick glance, laughed, and said, "How was that Sonia's today? I went in and I asked her for cash to buy me a snifter. Hee hee hee." From among the crowd that had just come in, somebody shouted and laughed out loud. Don't tell me she gave it to you." "You see this half picture here? I bought it with her money," said Marmeladov, addressing himself exclusively to Raskolnikov. "She gave me 30 kopecks with her own hands. The last she had, everything. I could see that myself. She said nothing. She only looked at me in silence, not as if it done here on earth, but there, where they sorrow over people, where they weep, and where they do not reproach. No, they do not reproach. Yet it hurts worse. It hurts so much worse. And then they do not reproach. 30 kopecks, yes, sir. And suppose she needed them. Suppose she needed them right now. What do you think, my dear sir? She has to keep up a neat, clean style. Now her polish, that neat, clean style costs money. You understand that? That's something extra. You understand, don't you? Well, she has to buy makeup too. Can't do without it. Starched petticoats and a little slipper to display her foot more enchantingly as she steps over a puddle. You understand, don't you, sir, what this kind of polish means? Well, then, here I am, her own blood father, and I took her 30 kopecks to go and get myself drunk, and I drink ink, and it's all gone. Well, who's going to be sorry for the likes of me? You sorry for me, sir? You sorry for me now or not? Go on and say it, sir. Are you sorry or are you not? He. He wanted to pour himself another drink, but none was left by now. The half bottle was empty. Why should anyone be sorry for you? Shouted the owner, who was near him. There was an outburst of laughter and swearing. Those who had been listening had laughed and swore, and so did those who had not been listening, but merely caught a glimpse of the singular figure of the formal clerk. Feel sorry? Why should anyone feel sorry for me? Marmeladov suddenly sang out. He rose, hands stretched forward, positively inspired, as though all along he had been merely waiting for those very words. Why feel sorry, you say? Oh, yes, there is no reason to feel sorry for me. I need to be crucified, not pitied. Crucified. Crucify, oh judge, crucify. And when you have crucified, then take pity. If you do that, I will come back and ask for crucifixion. For it is not merriment I crave, but tears and sorrow. Think of you, publican. Your bottle has been a sweetness unto me. It has been a sorrow. I have sought sorrow in its degree, sorrow and tears, and I found and savored them. He will feel sorry for us, who has felt sorry for all and understood each and every one. He alone is the judge. On the day of his coming, he will ask, where is the daughter who sold herself for the sake of a bad-tempered and consumptive stepmother, for the sake of someone else's little children? Where is the daughter of that felt sorry for her earthly father, an obscene drunkard, fearing not his beastliness? And he will say, come, I have already forgiven thee once. Once already I forgave thee. Thy sins, which are many, are forgiven thee, for thou hast loved much. And he gives my Sonia, forgives. Well, I know he forgives. When I was with her not long ago, I felt this in my heart. And he will judge and forgive all, and the good and the evil, the wise and the humble. And when he has finished judging all, he will summon us to. You two, come forth, he will say. "Come forth, you drunkards! Come forth, you weaklings! Come forth, you shameless ones!" And we will all come forth unashamed, and we will stand before him, and he will say, "You are swine, made in the image of the beast, and with his seal upon you, but you too come unto me." And the wise and the clever will cry out, "Lord, why dost thou receive these men?" And he will say, "I receive them, O wise and clever ones, because not one among them considered himself worthy of this." And he will stretch out his hand unto us, and we will fall down before him and weep. And we will understand everything. And Catherine Ivanova, she will understand too. "Oh Lord, thy kingdom come." He dropped to the bench, weak and exhausted, and he looked at no one, as though oblivious to her surroundings and deep in thought. His words had produced a certain impression. For a moment the silence reigned, then the laughter and swearing broke out again. "He has it all figured out, talking through his hat, a fine civil servant," and so on and so on. "Let us go, sir," Marmeladov said suddenly, lifting his head and addressing Raskolnikov. "Take me home. Kozel's house in the yard. It's time to get back to Catherine Ivanova." Raskolnikov had long since wanted to leave, and it had occurred to him to help Marmeladov, who seemed much weaker on his feet than in his speech. He leaned heavily on the young man. They had perhaps 200 or 300 paces to go. As they approached the house, fear and confusion possessed the drunkard more and more. "I am not afraid of Catherine Ivanova now," he muttered in agitation. "And it's not because she starts pulling on my hair that I'm afraid. What I do care about hair doesn't mean a thing. If she starts pulling, it is even better. That is not what I'm afraid of. I am afraid of her eyes. Yes, her eyes. I'm also afraid of those red stains on her cheek, and I'm afraid of the way she breathes. You know the way they breathe when they have this disease, when their feelings are all tense and excited. I am so afraid of the children's weeping, because if Sonia did not bring them food, well, I don't know. I just don't know. But I am not afraid of blows. You must realize, sir, that such blows not only fail to inflict pain, they are actually a pleasure. I cannot get along without them. It is better. Let her beat me. It distracts her. It is better. There's this house, Kozel's house. He, a mechanic, a German, rich. Lead on." How many more pages? Okay, one more page. They entered from the yard and climbed up the 4th floor. The further they mounted, the darker the stains became. It was almost 11 by then. There was no real night in Petersburg at this time of the year, but at the top of the stairs it was quite dark. At the very top of the stairs, a small grimy door stood open. A candle butt illuminated a squalid room about 10 paces long. Everything in it was visible from the landing. The room was in terrible disorder, with all kinds of rags scattered about, especially children's old clothes. A tattered bedsheet stretched across the far corner, probably with a bed behind it. There were only 2 chairs, and an extremely battered couch with some kind of water-repellent covering. In front of this stood an old pine kitchen table, unpainted and uncovered. At this one edge stood a burned-down tallow candle butt and an iron holder. The Marmeladovs, it seemed, lived in a room of their own, not in a corner or of someone else's room, but their room served as a passageway. The door that led to the other rooms or cubicles into which Amalia Lipowichel's apartment was divided stood ajar. It was loud and noisy there. Someone laughed. They were playing cards and drinking tea. Every now and then the most unceremonious words came flying out. Raskolnikov immediately recognized Catherine Ivanova, a delicately built woman, fairly tall and well-proportioned. With still attractive dark brown hair, she had grown terribly thin, and her cheeks had turned red, as though with stain. She paced that small room, hands folded across her chest, lips parched, her breath coming in broken and irregular gasps. Her eyes flashed as though with fever, yet her gaze was sharp and steady. In the last flickering out of the burned-out candle butt, this consumptive and agitated face produced a painful impression. To Raskolnikov she seemed about 30. She was obviously much younger than Marmeladov. She seemed immersed in a kind of oblivion and did not notice them as they came in. She did not see and she did not listen. Though the room was stifling, she did not open the window. A stench wafted up the stairs, but the door to the landing was not closed. Though the partly open door from the inner corridor, waves of tobacco smoke drifted. She coughed, but did not shut the door. The youngest child, a girl about 6, sat on the floor asleep, her head buried in the couch. A boy, a year or so older, stood up in a corner, quivering and weeping. He must have been beaten not long ago. The elder daughter, about 9, stood in the corner by the side of her small brother. She was rather tall and spindly as a matchstick, and had on a threadbare, tattered chemise, under a shabby light wool cape that was flung over her naked shoulders. The cape had probably been made for her some years back, since it did not now reach anywhere near her knees. Her long, wizened, matchstick-like arm was draped about her brother's neck, and she seemed to be soothing him, whispering to him, restraining him somehow so he no longer whimpered. At the same time, she was following her mother with her huge, dark, terror-stricken eyes, which tended to seem even larger in that meager and frightened little face. Marmeladov did not enter the room, remaining on his knees in the doorway, but he pushed Raskolnikov on ahead. Seeing a stranger, the woman paused distractedly in front of him, and came to herself for a moment, as though she was groping to imagine what in the world that he had come for. An explanation seemed to come quickly to mind, perhaps to the effect that he must be on his way to one of the other rooms, since hers was a passageway. She then paid no further attention to him, but walked through the door to shut it. Seeing her husband on his knees at the threshold, she cried out, "Ah!" she screamed in a frenzy. "He's come back! The monster! The hoodlum! Where's the money? What's in your pocket? Show me! Those aren't your clothes! Where are your clothes? Where's the money? Speak up!" She fell to searching him. Marmeladov immediately stretched his hands to both sides, humbly and obedient, in order to make her search of his pockets easier. There was not a kopeck. "Where's the money?" she yelled. "Oh, Lord, he's drunk it all up. But there were 12 rubles left in the box." Suddenly, she seized him in a frenzy by the hair and dragged him into the room. Marmeladov made it easier for her by meekly sliding after her on his knees. "And I tell you, I enjoy it. I tell you, I feel no pain, but I actually enjoy it, my dear sir." This he shouted out as he was being shaken by the hair, and once his forehead even struck to the floor. Goals, I guess, I don't know. The youngest child asleep on the floor woke and wept. The boy in the corner lost control, trembled violently, and screamed and flung himself upon his sister, terror-stricken, almost in a fit. Half awake, the older girl shook like a leaf. "He drank it up! He drank it all up! Everything!" the poor woman shouted out in desperation. "And his clothes are not the same! They're hungry! Hungry!" Wringing her hands, she pointed to the children. "Oh, damn this life! And you there!" Suddenly, she hurled herself on Raskolnikov. "Aren't you ashamed? So you were drinking with him at the saloon, were you? You were drinking with him, too! Get out!" Without saying a word, the young man hastened to depart. By now, the inner door was wide open, and from the threshold peered several curious onlookers. Brazen, laughing faces pushed their way in, cigarettes or pipes dangling from their mouths, skull caps on their heads. Some were in their bathrobes, some quite unbuttoned, scantily and immodestly dressed in disarray. Some still held playing cards in their hands. They laughed with particular amusement when Marmeladov, pulled by the hair, shouted out that he enjoyed it. Some of them even came into the room. At last, an ominous shriek was heard, and that was Amalia Lipowischel, who now pushed her way forward. She was going to settle things in her own way. For the 100th time, she was going to threaten the poor woman to force her to move out by tomorrow. As he was leaving, Raskolnikov managed to thrust his hand into his pocket and pull out whatever coins he had left and change from the ruble. He put them unnoticed on the windowsill. Later on the stairs, he had second thoughts and wanted to turn back. "What the hell am I doing?" he thought. "I need that money myself, and they have Sonia after all." But he decided it was impossible to take the money back. Y'all, the modern day, or the first Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast wants to be Raskolnikov so bad, bro. Even if it hadn't been impossible, he would not in any case have taken it back. He waved his hand and set out for his own apartment. "Sonia needs makeup after all," he continued as he strode along the street. He smiled caustically. "That kind of polish costs money." And maybe our Sonia herself will go broke today because, after all, there is a risk involved hunting big game or prospecting for gold. Without my money, they might not have a thing tomorrow. Sonia, that's quite a gold mine they've got, and they know how to dig. They know how to dig, though, and they've gotten used to it. I don't know. Okay, the reason why I'm laughing, I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about something that happened to me at the zoo a couple weeks ago, when I went to the zoo and there was a dad yelling at his child, and when I went to the zoo, I had to do this thing for an assignment where I write on a sheet of paper bad behaviors of zoogoers, as well as observing different animals, ethographs or whatever. And I said loudly, I'm like, this father's yelling at his children. And then my boyfriend was with me. He's like, the dad definitely heard you say that. Sorry guys. In game though. They wept, and then they got used to it. That scoundrel man, he gets used to anything. Well, and what if I'm wrong? He suddenly exclaimed involuntarily. What if man really isn't a scoundrel? Man in general, that is. The race, I mean, the whole human race. Then the rest is prejudice, empty fear, and there are no barriers, and everything is as it should be. Bro, oh my god, that chapter was so long. Oh my god, I got so tired towards the end. Oh my god. This is a whale of a book, but it's really good, so yeah.